back. So I'm going to start by introducing, I am so excited to have Gabby and Megan here from Fridays for Future. And Gabby Elhav is a 16-year-old student, an artist, and a youth climate activist who has been volunteering as a co-organizer and a co-coordinator with Fridays for Future Toronto since the July of 2020. She is interested in tackling the climate crisis intersectionally and through community care and mobilization. Now, I think, Gab, you wanted to screen share, you want to be spotlighted along with Megan at the same time. Right, so I'm going to introduce Megan as well. And Megan is a 15-year-old high school student and climate justice activist who also organizes with Fridays for Future Toronto. And I'm going to welcome them and invite them to start speaking now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. Well, you've already introduced us, but I'm Megan. I'm here with my friend and fellow organizer, Gab. She uses any pronouns. And thank you so much for inviting us. And today we're going to be talking about holding engaging conversations for a youth audience. Gabby, take it away.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you, everyone. I mean, we're probably going to say this like 5 times in this whole thing, but thank you for having us. It's always so empowering to be on these conversations. So when Megan and I think of holding meaningful conversations for youth, a quote we heard once from a friend and fellow organizer of ours comes to mind. The climate movement doesn't need more successful people. It needs more healers, lovers, thinkers, and storytellers. Megan and I started becoming active in the climate movement with a lot of fear, not only of the crisis itself, but fear of why we have to be tackling the climate crisis when we're so young, and if we're even capable enough to do so, and if us, just 2 people, can really make a difference in this sea of successful people. This kind of fear and self-doubt leads to a lot of youth not to take action in this movement. Not because they don't care, most people fear climate catastrophe, but because of how youth are viewed in this movement. We're cute kids with signs, or we're rowdy kids skipping school. And youth climate organizers who become successful, which can be attending panels, or it can be getting opportunities left and right, or speaking on large platforms, that's what I mean by successful, are expected to be completely eloquent, have the knowledge of a 50-year-old climate science made completely out of reach to young people.
Gabby and I are both part of the weekly actions team at Fridays for Future Toronto, and one of our main roles is to create space for youth to learn and talk about the climate crisis. But these fears kept coming up and still continue to come up in how we think about ourselves, the movement, and the spaces we are creating. We felt as though our identities as students, artists, athletes, and young people have been put on the back burner to create these spaces. But over time, we've learned more and more that these strengths of our identities across all youth are what truly drives the change. Those characteristics of open-mindedness, curiosity, anger, and fear are all driving factors of this climate movement. We don't need one person tackling this climate crisis perfectly or successfully to create change. We need a whole lot of people who care enough to fight and imagine a world that puts the planet and people first. And this would include like sharing stories, statistics, creations, and really any thoughts you have. You don't need to be a politician, world-class writer, or scientist to be a climate activist.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Megan said, these characteristics of open-mindedness, curiosity, anger, and fear, sometimes, youth are labeled certain things for being scared and angry, when really there are statistics about how incredible it is to really be upset in these movements. So all of these ideas translate into how to hold engaging conversations for youth. We stopped using bigger words and professional personas to talk to youth. Instead, we went back to some big climate questions and anxieties, like, why are fossil fuels so bad? Why do I feel so guilty about this crisis? Do I have to be a scientist to care about the climate? Why do I have to do this? Why aren't politicians doing this? All of these thoughts that youth already have. But having other young people to say, hey, I actually have these thoughts too. And then kind of guiding yourselves, which is kind of what this whole panel is about, to what we can do about those. It changes a lot. It's a big step. And when we started having conversations about these scary topics, just talking to youth like youth, and admitting throughout this whole conversation that fear is valid and completely understandable, but can also be used for a lot of good, more people started to take action in this movement and also be honest about their fear as well.
And overall, the main message we're trying to get across is that there's no right or wrong way to talk about the climate crisis. We just have to talk, and whatever that looks like in whatever space you're in, which is why it is so important that we're all here today. So, when holding these conversations, it is also important to know that this crisis is so complex. We can take simple actions to work towards solving climate change, but the way it affects people is not simple. There are youth, unlike Gabby and I, who are directly affected every day by this crisis, who haven't had the privilege to choose activism, but instead they are fighting for their own lives and well being. They have no choice but to act. For every person, one way or another, this crisis is very personal. We all have individual fears and doubts. Personally, I fear that one day I won't be able to have a family because it may not even be ethical to bring a life into a dying planet. And that is very scary for me to admit, but it's true emotions that I'm feeling. And I think it's important that whatever you have to express, just to start expressing it because you'll be adding to the collective voice and value of this movement. My generation did not create this crisis, but we are the last that has the chance to mitigate the effects. Thank you so much to everyone who helped create this space today for Gabby and I to share thoughts. Gabby, do you have any final things to say?
No, I just want to say thank you, everybody. You are all so empowering. We appreciate you all so much. Thank you so much.
I'm
Thank
going
you.
to share a link in the chat. Sorry, I'm just going to share a link in the chat to Fridays for Future Toronto website. And there you can find all of our social medias. You can even sign up for a newsletter to stay up to date with all of our upcoming actions.
Thank you both. I loved your message, and I'm glad we've recorded it so we can listen again.